My name is Jonah Jonathan, and welcome once again to the Jazz Musician's Voice. I'm doing an interview today with George G. He's a big band leader and a fantastic, all-around jazz guy. Used to play bass and has started that up again. Has been around and has had his big band for almost 40 years. Fantastic and knowledgeable guy, and he also talks about meeting Count Basie, meeting so many of the greats, leads his band at Swing 46 in New York and many other venues, has even been immortalized in the Marvel comic book universe, appeared in an animated series, and is actually in the encyclopedia, which is pretty cool for jazz. Hopefully we'll see more of that in the future. More jazz and jazz comic books, and George is just a really great guy to talk to. Very positive guy. One of his records is called "Swing Makes You Happy," which I truly believe is true. I actually was fortunate enough to sit in with this band a few times, the George G. Swing Orchestra, and they're all world-class musicians. Their musical director is Dave Gibson, fantastic trombonist. So thanks for watching this interview. Please subscribe, like, share, and stay tuned for future interviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to speak to George G., great jazz icon, if you will, big band leader for over 40 years,
Correct.
And, with the George G. Swing Orchestra. Believe it or not, you were a bassist before too. So
Yes, and you know what, Jonah, I'm happy to announce that I'm taking the lockdown as an opportunity to get my bass chops back up. I actually live I live in Astoria, Queens, and I live across a jazz bassist I work with my big band, Joseph Lepore, and he's been giving me lessons, and he lent me an upright bass to start getting my chops back up. So I'm hoping to get back a little on the playing side.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's never too late to do your instrument or to come back. I remember I first met you through Marcus McLaurin, and
Marcus,
he recommended me to sub for you guys today.
Right.
And I remember asking
his son has been working. Malik McLaurin has been working with us pretty regularly before the lockdown, and in all honesty, I started as a bassist back in the New York City public school system when I was a teenager, and then I sort of stopped playing and became more of a front man and a band leader and behind the scenes and on stage persona. But it feels really good to start playing again. And like I say, I don't have any fantasies of getting my chops to the point of really excelling. I just want to be able to play a tune or two with my band if they'll let me when the time is right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, it's funny because I was having a conversation with, I believe it was Lauren Sevian, about
Lauren, yes,
comic books and comic book characters. And I just remember coming across you, George G. Swing Orchestra. This is, I think, a Fantastic Four, right? And I remember seeing it in the cartoons. I was like, wow, I know that. That's George G.
Well, me and my band made an animated appearance on the Fox Marvel Action Hour back in 1995. And we recorded the music. I had speaking lines, and we were actually animated in the episode. It was a scene with the Fantastic Four at the Rainbow Room at Rockefeller Center. And it's thrilling to me because of all the things that I've done in my life, this is the only thing that my son is impressed by. When I told my son that I was on a Marvel animated episode, his eyes lit up and he thought it was the coolest thing. And he actually got onto he started texting his friends and sending clips of the videos. So I guess I've done at least one thing good in my son's eyes. You know what I mean? For sure.
Well, I mean, you actually really touch on like a fantastic thing because, you know, animation and anime was always popular in like Japan, and those shows are always popular. But in America, you know, Pink Panther was a big thing, bringing jazz in. I watched.
Oh man!
As a kid, I was watching the show Hey Arnold, which had a lot of jazz in it. And now that like Marvel is such a big thing with Disney, I mean, it was with Netflix before. I think it would be awesome for these comic book people to collaborate with jazz musicians and make like a full-fledged show that really has jazz in it.
I totally agree. And you know, stranger things have happened, so I wouldn't put it past a project in the future for sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I do have some connections with Marvel. Well, first of all, I did a search. And it's actually a Marvel fandom website that lists all the characters in the Marvel universe. And I was so surprised to find myself in the Marvel universe, like as a band leader. It's a George G as himself, band leader. And so like I hope to be on an episode. I actually think there's an episode of Marvel with an Asian American superhero coming up. So I'm not sure what character that is, but perhaps I can sneak in a guest appearance as the only Chinese American professional swing big band leader out there right now.
Well, you know,
I mean?
that's really fantastic. And I was talking with Peter Lin, who's the trombonist, and his first album, or his first couple albums, he actually had comic book animation in the liner notes with from Taiwan. And you know, that's definitely something hopefully we'll see more of in jazz. But let's start with your background, because you got a very extensive background. I mean, you believe it or not, you run this George G Swing Orchestra, which is really, in my opinion, one of the top swing orchestras in New York.
Thank you.
Swing 46. How did you first get involved in music? I mean, you said the New York schools, but talk about, you know, how you fell in love with jazz and big band jazz, and you attended school in Pittsburgh. So,
well, I attended university at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, but not for music, for mechanical engineering. And I think the biggest catalyst towards my big band career was I hosted a radio show on our college radio station in Pittsburgh. It was called a Make Believe Ballroom. It featured big band jazz, a more nostalgic big band, Dorsey, old Basie, old Ellington, old Glenn Miller, and Count Basie and his orchestra was doing a campus concert, and I took it upon myself to interview him for my radio program, and that was actually 41 years ago on December 9th. So it happened 41 years ago, where I had a very celebratory meeting and developed a friendship with the great Count Basie. And Mr. Basie, I told Mr. Basie about my aspirations to be a big band leader. That was my dream. And back in 1979, that was like, you know, that's outrageous. I mean, it's outrageous anytime to be a big band leader. But Mr. Basie took it upon himself to encourage me. And like I said, we developed a relationship where it was a privilege to call Mr. Basie not just a mentor, but also a friend. And during the last 4 or 5 years of his life and career, we always talked, and he never was able to see or hear my band, but I always kept him up to date, and he was always very, very, very encouraging. And to have the world's greatest legendary big band icon in your corner, I mean, what more can you say, for sure?
I mean, that's really fantastic. And, you know, exactly what, I mean, something that really struck me every time that I sub with your band, you've got like a huge songbook of the original tunes, and you guys are doing stuff that most big bands don't even do, and it's on the spot. To read those charts, that was the popular music back in the day, and there were so many big bands. Now there's like there's a select few, and you guys are keeping the art form and the legend of big band jazz, especially in a dance setting.
True.
Like weddings going, because if you go to see the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, that is not dance music. It's enjoyable and it's incredible, but it's not dance music,
Right. And what I love about my cast of characters in my big band and the big band that I formulated is that the musicians are all top-notch jazz New York musicians, and the repertoire is so wide-ranging. Obviously I have a wide repertoire of original, nostalgic 40s, 30s big band jazz, that I identify with all the top swing era big bands. And then of course, I have a repertoire of Count Basie, my musical idol, and I was privileged to work with one of Basie's arrangers, Mr. Frank Foster, an amazing saxophonist and an amazing big band arranger. I did an album with him in 2004 called Setting the Pace. That was, I'm really honored to say that it was Grammy nominated, and Frank came and worked with the band directly. So I have a wide repertoire of arrangements and compositions from Frank Foster in my library. And lately, I've been working a lot with my music director, trombonist David Gibson, and he's been adding a new facet of the ensemble, which is a little bit more modern, cutting-edge big band jazz. But the bottom line is that all our music swings and has a good dance beat. So as much as we don't like to say that we're cubby-holding to it as a dance band, but we always like to play music that's danceable, even if you're not dancing. If that makes any sense. You know what I mean?
No, it always struck me also, like your energy on the stage, like as the big band leader, you're like the ambassador. You're on stage and you're always, and you had that presentation that a lot of people don't know how to do, And so when you go into Swing 46, when you go into Swing 46, it's a real, it's an image, and like I've seen you've been on television. I've seen like videos of you doing weddings, doing like Battle of the Big Bands.
Jazz festivals, swing dances. I take my inspiration. Okay, musically, my inspiration is Basie. But showbiz wise, I take my inspiration as a band leader as a cross between Spike Jones, not the modern director, but the old Spike Jones was like this comedic big band leader that utilized a whole wide range of comedy in his music, and his band leading was very frantic. Is that a word? Frantic. But then my other inspiration, of course, is the great Cab Calloway. I mean, Cab Calloway was the ultimate hipster on stage. That man was a dynamo and never stopped. And I just wish, hopefully, that I can just be 1/1000th of a band leader as Cab Calloway is.
Well, the thing that I was fortunate enough to do, like I remember doing jazz history at William Patterson with Tim Newman, and it just got me interested enough. I heard Phil Schaap on the radio sometimes, Bird Flight. So I heard that he was having this get together at Jazz and Lincoln Center. I went there and I said, I'd like to learn from you or work with you. And he ended up becoming a mentor for me. And I learned all about jazz. I took his 201 and 301. I took 301 like a couple times and still barely passed the expert level exam because of Phil Schaap. He's he's
pretty serious, ain't he?
You're great jazzy. You've got a lot more to learn, So then I went to Rutgers, Newark for my master's in jazz history and research, learn more about big bands. I mean, there's such a extensive and legendary history of big band jazz, that a lot of people don't even know about. I mean, the band leaders, the legendary people. And, you know, if anything, you've solidified your name in the history books as a big band leader, still going on, you know. And this has been going, big band jazz has been going since the end of the 20s to now, you know.
Well, Jonah, what really amazes me is the current chapter that we're in the big band timeline. Because when I first started being a big band leader in Pittsburgh, and when I first started my big band in the 1980, early 80s, it was really outlandish for a young musician, and mind you, a young musician of my heritage, you know, being Chinese American. It was a rarity to be interested in big band music, because big band music really didn't, like, the recent wave of big band jazz or dancing and being in the mainstream really didn't start to, like, the early or mid 90s, a resurgence. So I was really so pleasantly surprised that people started swinging and digging big band jazz. But the current chapter of big band jazz is very strong. You know, people of all ages, races, and creed are dancing and enjoying big band jazz, not just in New York and America, but literally all around the world.
Yeah.
And that's a chapter that still is being written, the current chapter.
You know, we all have to give, like, credit where it's due, though, because you know, you dealt with a lot of. I mean, I know because I know you, but I would assume you've dealt with a lot of, like, you know, racism. You've dealt with all of that by doing what you were doing, and now some of it is coming to fruition. Your hard work, you know, the payoff, and you know, that's really great because. You know, the naysayers, you never listen to the naysayers. You just do what you're doing, you know, and you get to where you are, you know.
Well, you know, Jonah, it goes to the root of big band jazz in a sense that, you know, my last album, which I recorded like 5 years ago, was a collaboration I did with our music director, David Gibson. But the title was called Swing Makes You Happy. And when I first mentioned that title, folks were a little cynical, but then really when they thought about it, swing jazz is an art form that came during the 30s and the 40s. America was going through not just a post-Depression era, but they were going through a major global conflict. And it was, you know, I mean, yes, times now are kind of rough, of course, but when you really think about it, that was a rough time in American or global history.
Yeah.
And swing music was making people happy. And to this day, it still does it. And for me, when swing music doesn't make me happy anymore, Jonah, then I really will consider not doing it. Because you know, I mean,
and if
it makes me happy.
Exactly what you were saying. If you study history, you know, when I did my master's thesis on, like, the Harlem jazz scene, you know, it's so ironic that the times were so tough in the end of the, you know, the 20s when the Depression started, and then World War II and everything. It's amazing that swing music essentially was the popular music that kept everybody happy. And if you watch any of the movies or you read about World War II, even the Germans were listening to swing music because it was tough times. It was not, and every time they turn the radio on, you've got you know, swing, jazz, big band music.
Well, you know, the Germans and the Nazis actually were very against swing music and the idea of the art form, mainly because it was an American art form.
But secretly, they would turn it on when, you know.
Well, I actually heard recently on a piece of history that maybe I've forgotten, but they actually had swing bands in Nazi Germany that perform events and dances underground. I mean, there was a movie called Swing Kids,
Yeah.
like 20 years ago, that talked about a bunch of a group of young German teenagers that love swing music, and they dance in the risk of being, I guess, raided. And they also used like in Japan. In Japan, they had like Tokyo Rose that made all these radio announcements. In Germany, they would do swing broadcasts and change the lyrics to make it seem like the Americans were losing, and you know, it was a German propaganda program with swing music.
Or if you watch Indiana Jones, you remember he was in I think it was Shanghai, and they were singing, and it's like set in the 30s, right at the middle of Nazi times, and there's a big band singing.
In fact, wasn't his future Steven Spielberg's future wife what was that, the woman that was the lead? She was like a jazz singer, and I remember.
Yeah, she was a jazz singer, and
right?
she's
Wasn't
like,
she in
it's like
Shanghai?
she's singing "Anything Goes," and then you know,
Indiana Jones,
Harrison Ford walks in, and he's,
Well,
I mean,
Shanghai. That's on my bucket list, Jonah. Funny that you mentioned Shanghai. I mean, ironically, I've performed all around the world. I've been to Japan, South America, Middle East, Europe, and Canada, but I've never, ever have performed in China. And I think when all this current situation is behind us and we're back out there swinging and jumping and jiving again, I'm going to put it on my serious to-do list, is to get the band to China. And that is on my bucket list of swing endeavors.
Believe it or not, I was, I know Eric Wyatt, who's a great guy who knows Theo Croker, and they did a lot of jazz in China, and they were actually going to bring me over for 6 months, but then there was something with the logistics of it. But it's possible to go to China for a while and play jazz. They love jazz over there. So
right. I should be their poster. I should be their poster child of big band jazz. I mean, a hip big band leader from New York City with Chinese American roots.
Well,
I don't know.
We'll make it happen. I mean,
I hope so.
This is something. I mean, I just had this conversation with the bassist Rob Duguay, who was the leader of the Jazz Standard. But it's unfortunate that America doesn't appreciate its great art form, and it's always been that way. America never appreciated jazz. It's other places that appreciated it more. But we cannot give in to that. I'm sure that we will get our credit when it's due. Again, music and. I remember you're mentioning Dave Gibson. I have to give credit for that too, because he's a very talented trombonist, and we used to do those gigs on Sundays. At
the smokehouse. Yes, at John Brown Smokehouse. Unfortunately, they closed recently because of the New York City restaurant COVID and stuff like that. But we used to have the Sunday night. Or Sunday early evening jazz jam at the Smokehouse. And David Gibson is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, not only is he a talented trombonist, but he is like a math scientist in the sense of his big band arrangement and composition. His penmanship in a big band composition arrangement, it's utmost. I can't wait to go back into the recording studio with the band that Dave writes for us, because we have an amazing array of originals and standards, plus our singer John Dokes, who's in the mode of like Joe Williams and Billy Eckstine. He has a great repertoire of big band charts that we need to lay down in the studio once that time comes back, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, man, that smokehouse thing was so much fun. The only thing I remember is that I always leave there with like a full stomach because they give us as much food as we wanted. We eat whatever.
Yeah, they paid us in burnt ends. You know what I mean? They paid us in brisket, pastrami, and burnt ends.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great. Yeah, but you know what? My cholesterol thanks me for not doing that gig anymore, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, now here's a question. Like, getting to more serious topics. Like,
okay.
If there was one piece of advice that Count Basie instilled on you that you wanted to pass to future generations, I mean, it's such a legendary guy, Count Basie. What was it that he wanted you to take away?
Very simply, Jonah, I was expecting. I did an interview with him, and it's posted on YouTube. On my YouTube channel, I have all this, vintage stuff, and the Basie interview from '79 is on it. And my interview, I have to admit, my interviewee talents were very limited. I came across as a young, starstruck, a fan of Basie. And I asked him for some words of wisdom in my pursuit of starting a big band. And I was expecting this whole gamut of wisdom from the great Count Basie. And he did give me some wisdom, but it was a very general outlook that can be applied to life in general. And he told me, Jonah, that if there's something in your life that you really, really want and you are true to it, then there's gonna be times that it's gonna be dark and you're gonna want to give up. And then at that moment, George, you gotta remember that Count Basie, not just anybody, but Count Basie told you, George G., to persevere. And it was so simple. And at that time, Joan, I said to myself, oh, is that all there is? But you know what? I have to admit, even recently, being off the stage for the last 10 months, and I'm fortunate to have a loving family in my health around me. But being off the stage and not being with my cats and performing and spreading the big band joy has been really, really hard. And it's been a little bit of a dark time, but I have to admit that I reached in and remember that Count Basie, not just anybody, but Count Basie told me, George G., to persevere. So, Jonah, I think that can apply to everybody.
That's beautiful.
With Basie's permission, I'd like to throw it out there.
You say it now to us on the camera. Say it one time. Count Basie.
It's for everybody. Yeah, for everybody.
Yeah, I mean that's so true. And if anything, if times are tough, the going is tough, I just go back to my interviews sometimes. Like I go and look at Mulgrew when he was so encouraging, Mulgrew Miller who passed.
Right, of course.
I go and I think about Alex Lane, the times when things were rough for me. I was in a bad spot. Maybe I hardly had any money to get home or something. He would drop me some money and give me some advice, And I think that's so important in this music, us jazz musicians, like passing that down to future generations. And the two of us, your son now is almost. I remember when I met him. He was young.
He's 18 now.
He's 18. He's almost going to college.
He is in college.
I have a son now who's probably almost close to what his age was when I first met your son. My son is like almost 10 years old now. And the thing is, we want to pass it on to the future. We want those children to learn those things and pass it to their children and keep it going like that.
Especially, Jonah, the younger jazz generation. I mean, speaking for myself, being around for 4 decades have given me the badge of honor of endurance. And over the decades, I've been fortunate enough to have the advice, the consultation, the company, the inspiration directly of not just Basie, but I've been fortunate enough to interact with everyone from Max Roach to Roy Eldridge to Clark Terry to Frank Foster to Frank West to Al Gray to Doc Cheatham to Milt Hinton to Milt Jackson and all these great musicians, Joe Williams, Billy Eckstein, Maxine Sullivan, that I've had a chance to spend a connection with. And I'm so lucky and privileged to not be able to see these great jazz musicians and artists and character personalities on YouTube or on DVDs, but to be able to have moments in my memory where I can go back and recall and see how that made me the person that I am. Not just the band leader and musician, but the person that I am. And Jonah, I hope to be able to share that to anyone who's worthy and willing. I don't want to push stuff. As a band leader, I love to share and be encouraging to future generations. But like I say, my talent is just loving to swing, knowing good people, and being true to the art form.
That's incredible, the names you mentioned. You definitely came up at a unique time, because some of those names are people who have since long passed, but it was like some of the originators of this art form, which is incredible.
And for me, playing dance music, I have that same relationship with a lot of iconic personalities from the dance Lindy Hop scene. Great dancers that were prominent in the 30s and the 40s, that are no longer with us, like Frankie Manning, Norma Miller, and they shared with me another aspect of the big band art form, because the Lindy Hop and the big band are tied together artistically. And even if you play, like Basie always said about music, about big band jazz, look into the audience, and when you see someone tapping their feet, then you're doing something right. And they don't have to literally be Lindy hopping or swing dancing or foxtrotting. If they're tapping their feet, then you got them. And I'll never forget that, because it's true.
Well, people, if you have been sleeping on George G or the George G Swing Orchestra, when this epidemic is over, you definitely have to go check them out. The weekly residency at Swing 46 and all the different spots.
23 years we've been at Swing 46, and just to folks out there, Swing 46 is a jazz club in Times Square, New York City, the crossroad of the world. They have we've been there. We were the first band to play there, and we actually were the last band to play there before the lockdown, because we played there on a Tuesday, and the lockdown in New York happened a Wednesday or Thursday afterwards. And I can't wait to get back there. They're hanging in there, and I wish them luck, because jazz club or live music venues in New York City and around the world needs our support. And I want to be back there on that stage. And Jonah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but I think folks are going to want to party and do some serious swinging when the time is right. Yeah. Hopefully soon.
I anticipate. I've been talking with a lot of people. Usually when you have a low, then you have a big high, and I anticipate that the world is going to have one big party when this is all done. Going to be a whole year of everybody out and about, because right now everybody's indoors.
I tell you, it's gonna be a party for multiple reasons. You know what I mean? Obviously this pandemic and the politics. Everything is is so in upheaval. You know what I mean. So I think the Roaring '20s. We thought 2020 was going to be the start of the Roaring '20s, but I think the Roaring '20s haven't really started yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That should come back. George, thank you so much for speaking with us. People can check you out at your website, it's georgeg.com. Check you out on YouTube. That's awesome that you did those interviews, and major props to doing them. I mean, I remember when I first started, it was a similar thing. Like you have to do a lot of them to start getting comfortable. And especially you speak to certain people, you can be like that. But, I encourage anybody who wants to do interviews, just keep doing them, because I remember even listening, anybody who's listened to Terry Gross on Fresh Air, if you listen to some of her early interviews, she was a similar thing. She was nervous. She wouldn't ask. And now she's done like thousands of them. So she's like very, very sure. And she knows exactly what to ask, and that's important, to keep documenting. Props to your son who's 18. He's going to be going off to future stuff. He always would come with you to the music, and
Well, he might like the roast beef more than the music, to tell you the truth. But Jonah, I commend you and keep doing what you're doing. And as a jazz big band leader, I really appreciate what you do, and I hope to be able to be invited back again, perhaps when we do our next recording project or whatever. When we have more news. So
absolutely.
I thank you so much for your time and energy towards this.
Thank you, George. Cats, check him out. It's George G and the Swing Orchestra.
Keep swinging, everybody.
Keep swinging.